Okay, so we'll take a look at Chad's log here. What I've already done is I've gone down to this button here and deselected all of the values here because we don't want to see them all at once. And we're starting with coolant temp because that's one of the most important ones. Coolant temp actually means cylinder head temp, and you'll see this on some of the logs. It actually means cylinder head metal temp, so it'll read typically higher than actual coolant temp. And so what we can see here is a steady progression from start. It was an ambient of 84 degrees, and it settles up around 168 or so. And what we'd expect to see over time is it actually kind of peaking and then going down again, peaking and then going down again. He's running relatively steady state. I'd prefer to see a little bit more oscillation, but once he starts driving and stuff, this is just an idle log. We can verify that the cooling system is functioning correctly. So nothing wrong here. The next thing we can look at, obviously we want to make sure that battery voltage is okay. And you can see it's scaled the axis, but really the mins and maximums are pretty tight. Battery voltage looks good. We'll go to fuel source, which is information on what table is being used to control fueling in here, and this is exactly what we want to see. It'll start off at 4, which is cold start fueling, and then it switches to 0, which is when it goes into closed loop, meaning it starts looking at feedback from the oxygen sensor. So in closed loop, if we look at the O2 sensor voltage and lay this over there, there we go. We have this pattern of the voltage goes is up and then down, and then as soon as we hit mode 0, which is closed loop, it starts oscillating, which is what we want because the fuel trims themselves are oscillating, as you can see. And if you actually look at these two things together, you'll find that the oscillation should coincide. And the fuel trims are looking pretty good. Our average is 0.96, and we want it as close to 1 as possible. So with short-term fuel trims, over 1 means it's taking that percentage of fuel away. Less than 1 means it's adding that percentage of fuel. And what will happen is short-term fuel trims are what it's doing instantaneously to try to get the oxygen sensor in the right range and switching. And then what happens over time is if there's a consistent need to alter fuel trims, they get stored into the long-term fuel trim, which is this guy here. And so what we can see already is that the long-term fuel trim also is averaging 0.96, which is totally fine and in the right range. Nothing wrong. So what we would expect to see, for instance, if there was a vacuum leak at idle, would be lots of additional fuel has to be added. That's because there's air, unmetered air that's going in there, and so therefore extra fuel needs to be added. But we're not seeing that. So fuel trims are both very close to 1 in this case. Coolant temps are looking safe, and voltages are also looking safe. We want to look as well at, so we know kind of the state of things. This is a throttle position absolute, and of course it really hasn't moved. He hasn't touched the throttle. These are just minute differences. It looks like it's all over the place. Really, that should just be a flat line, because these are just minute tenths of a volt that it's jumping all over the place. I really don't like the way LiveLink Gen 2 scales things. The original older LiveLink was better that way and more intuitive. But yeah, so many software companies make stuff and it gets worse, don't they? We also can tell that he wasn't moving. We'll check the vehicle speed sensor later on when he's doing the drive log. We can take a look at RPMs, and RPMs look just fine and dandy where they should be. Starting off cold start with a high idle, and then as it warms up, dropping down. In addition, we can check the idle speed duty cycle for the little idle air control solenoid that's up underneath the intake manifold there, and 48%. That's pretty good. That gives us plenty of leeway up or down to control idle with. So that's also looking healthy. If this was all the way at say 60% or way down, then I would suspect something's wrong. This is right in the middle. That's quite good. So everything's looking good for this log right now. The only other thing we can check for is let's see if he's got he has 1 code pending, so we need to know what that is. It should be 0, so we need to follow up and find out what that code is. Otherwise everything else seems to be running quite well, and that could just be something that was intermittent at one point. It may not mean anything. It could be just a stored code that was in there from something not being plugged in that was then plugged in, or something like that. But in any case, this log's looking very good. The only question on it is, what is that stored code? So we'll be looking at more of these logs, and I'll be recording more of me looking at these logs as we go on, so you guys can start to do it for yourselves and see what's going on.